Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Donahue, and I am very grateful that you are visiting with me today in this course. I want to just say right from the very beginning of this that I am a fan. I don't know you personally that are watching this right now, but I'm a huge fan of educators, partly because of what I do for a living. And I've been for the last 25 years, I have been in schools speaking as the motivational speaker, but having to, work alongside great people like yourself. That's one aspect of that. But the other part of it is that I grew up in South Boston, Massachusetts. You're going to hear more about this later, but I grew up in South Boston and in a crazy home. And if it wasn't for three or four teachers that were amazing to me, I wouldn't be doing this course right now. There's no way. So I want to just thank you for what you do. I don't think people understand, especially today, how important your job is and how hard it is. And so I don't want this course, this lesson, the system, whatever, to be intimidating in the sense that, we're going to be taking up a lot of time and doing a lot of things. This will make sense more. But I just want to say from the very beginning of this that I'm a fan and thank you so much for being willing to invest in kids' lives and in their education and their future. And so yeah, I think it's gonna be a good time together. This is kind of a laid back setting. I don't want it to be like a teaching, like we're just sitting here, blah, 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 with slides. There will be some slides, but I just want to have a conversation with you about what you're doing and how we can maximize what you're doing. And that'll make sense in a minute. But let me go ahead and start out by telling you a little bit about me. My name is Mike Donahue and I am a motivational speaker. I have a program called Value Up. I've been doing it since 2000, actually 2002 was when we started getting into schools and talking to kids. It started out where I grew up, like I said, in Boston, Massachusetts, and was in a dysfunctional home. There was a lot of really crazy things that happened in my family. There's a lot of pictures here of my professional life, my personal life, but I um, grew up and, my dad left when I was 5. There was a lot of turmoil in our family. I used drugs and alcohol primarily to self-medicate. And like I said, if there wasn't for a few teachers, I wouldn't have made it. I was emancipated as a minor. So when I was 16, there was a domestic violence situation that happened in my home that I was essentially moved out of the home and put into a rooming house. They just emancipated me. And Mrs. Kenny, Mrs. Kelly, Coach Bartasek, Mr. Goldfarb, amazing people in my life. They helped me navigate that and get through that. And they weren't just academically focused with me, although that was part of it. They, emotionally helped me get through that time and convinced me not to quit school because that was a huge temptation for me to do that. But they kept me in school. Ended up going in the military. I was stationed at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. I went from the ocean in Massachusetts to corn and cows. I thought I was being punished for something, to be honest with you. No, just kidding. But no, it was a crazy adjustment. But what a great time in my life, because at that time I ended up going to this church, and this is not a church talk, but when I went to that church, they really treated me with respect and value. Um, I'm not going to get into all the spiritual part of it because that's private, but the relational part of that experience for me was amazing because they helped me see that I had value. And really that became the foundation of what I talk about in schools is their value. And again, we'll get into that more, but I ended up becoming a youth pastor. I went through their training. I got out of the military when I was, after 4 years, loved the military, but, um, really wanted to pursue helping students, taking my story that happened to me in Boston and translating it to helping them, and which worked. My first youth pastor job was in Rockford, Illinois, and it just so happened that I got employed as well at a school. So I was at a private school, about 250 high school kids. It was a great experience for me because when I got there, that culture was crazy. It was the inmates were running the asylum, and so I got to see in 5 years a culture completely change, and it really did. And some of the concepts and theories that I'm going to be talking about in this course definitely came from there. We saw that thing change, and I don't think at the time we knew it could be a system, but now as I've looked back, and there was some very intentional things that we did that worked, that made that culture change. And so we're going to get into that. But that was a great experience for me. I went to Denver, Colorado. I was there for a few years, and as a youth pastor, and also worked at a school. And while I was there, like right after I left, actually, um, two of the kids that were killed in the Columbine massacre were in my youth ministry. So Cassie Burnell and Rachel Scott had both attended Breakthrough in Denver, and so I happened to be in Nebraska at the time. I went back to Nebraska, back at that church that I originally went to, and I was the youth pastor there. That had a profound effect on me. I loved my job as a youth pastor, but I really wanted to get into schools, not with a religious message, but a message of value. Right. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on the Columbine thing, but there's a lot of different variables that contributed to that, crazy day. But bottom line, you can't deny the fact that culture played a role in that. It played a huge role. And so what I saw was we need to get into schools and help kids see that other kids have value. And so that's how that started, and started, right away, just, putting together a team, and we broke bricks and ripped phone books. We did a bunch of gimmicky things, but it was great. And we ended up having a good time doing that. And it just grew. And as we really got to see the real issues in the school, we just tweaked our program and made it fit what was happening, and it just took off. And I thought I'd do it for 4 or 5 years, but it ended up being, I'm still doing it. So that was in 2004 when I officially left my church and started a company. And so here we are. And so let me give you some endorsements. There's a few people that actually like me. This is Daryl Scott. He's the founder of Rachel's Challenge. He said this about me. He said, Mike Donahue has some of the best insights I've ever heard on connecting to teenagers, and I don't say that lightly. This content is not sugar-coated. It's real, raw, and full of the wisdom that only comes from years of experience. If you're struggling to create a positive social culture in your school, if you feel like that world is too powerful, this course will change everything. Every educator needs this. And I only had to pay him $100. No, I'm just kidding. Another endorsement that I really appreciate a lot is Matt Hamilton. He was a 2025 NEA Foundation National Teacher of the Year. I've worked with Matt a lot. He's been a huge contributor to Value Up. And he said this: we have implemented most of the concepts of the Value Up culture building course over the past few years at East Jordan Middle School in Michigan. It has been an absolute game changer for us. I've worked with Mike personally several times throughout the years. He lives what he teaches. Without a doubt, he's the best I've ever seen at truly connecting with and reaching teenagers. This stuff is gold. I love Matt Hamilton. He's a great man. And then the last endorsement is from one of my personal heroes, uh, Tom Osborne. I actually became a huge Cornhusker fan after I moved here to Nebraska. I ended up going to a couple games and seeing the absolute insanity that Nebraska fans bring to their games and to their fandom. It's unbelievable. And so I became a fan pretty quickly. But he said this after he actually was the coach. He became a congressman and started working in schools a little bit with the methamphetamine epidemic that was happening in our state. He said this: Mike's insight and expertise at knowing what the root issues with teenagers was instrumental in our success in stemming the tide of methamphetamine use in our state. Whatever Mike Donahue writes about connecting to teenagers will be worth reading. Thanks, Tom. Some of my Nebraska friends get so jealous of me when I bring up the fact that I worked with Tom. So whatever. So we have the culture building system. I hate calling it a system because that just conjures up like, oh my gosh, there's more stuff for us to do. And usually when people come into your school with a system or with some kind of new program, it works for a little while, or somebody gets excited about it, and then it just fades out. And let's face it, some of those things just are hype, right? They just, somebody's excited about it and they push it, and then eventually it just fades away. And it's just one of those things that you end up paying a lot of money for, and it didn't work. And so I don't want this to be that, right? What I realized, the reason I'm calling it a system is because what I've realized is that you are already doing a lot of these things that I'm going to be talking about. What you don't have is a system that puts it together that gives it intentionality to make it more impactful, right? So I'm going to show you a picture here of my hockey team. We were decent. This is a beer league, right? Where these guys aren't NHL quality, not even close, right? Most of us didn't play college or high school. Some played high school, but most of us are just hacks, right? So it's a great league. Did it for like 20 years. One of the seasons that I was playing, a guy came in from Canada. He moved to Omaha and he said, "Listen, I've watched you guys play. Let me help you out with something." And so he gave us this little system, and it wasn't complicated. He just basically said, "If you're left wing and the puck is in this corner, do this. Right wing, do this. Center, do that." And don't compromise. Just every time try to do this triangle, try to switch around. When the puck goes this way, you go that way, that kind of thing. And it was really simple. Also with the D, those guys were pinching up too far and getting lost, and then we'd get scored upon because they would, have a breakaway on us. And so he said, listen, if the puck's over in this corner, the right D does this, left D does this, and then just switch it if it goes in the other corner. Real simple. It wasn't rocket science. It wasn't that hard. It just was a simple system that he put in place. And I'm not kidding you when I say this. We won every game after that. And we ended up winning the league championship. Like, we dominated. We didn't just win, we dominated. Like 7-3, 8-2. We were killing teams. And nobody knew. Like, they thought there was a ringer and all this other stuff. We had a lot of controversy with it, but it was great because really what it came down to is a system. And that's really what I want to do with this. Is I want to bring out a system. I want to help take what you're already doing and putting it into some intentionality that we'll be able to monitor, we'll be able to track it, we'll be able to see its progress and make tweaks along the way, and be intentional about creating a culture in your school that's conducive to learning, right? So let's get into this. Really what it comes down to is a number. It all comes down to a number. If you could just picture kids walking into your school right now with a number on their chest that represents who they really are. This number isn't the result of a test score or ranking student academic improvement. It is an invisible number written on the chest of every student in your school, and that number reflects the value that each student gives themselves, right? So it's like this. It's like they have this value that they see themselves already. Like when I poll kids, I'm at a school, I'll ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being you see your true intrinsic value. And we're going to define that later on in this course. But when I say this to students, listen, I spell this out for them. This is what intrinsic value looks like. You were born with value. And when I scale it and go, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, do you see that? 1, you don't at all. 10, you really see it. Where do you fit? And honestly, I never get pushback from kids. They always tell me their number. They know their number. They know what they what they rank inside, right? They'll think about it a little bit, but they'll definitely talk about it. And this number is very important because this number affects you and your students more than anything else, right? Because it's motivation for learning, as we're gonna, kind of unpack. I really believe this after doing this for so long, and in my own personal experience, behavior follows belief. If there are behavior issues in your school, I'll guarantee that it stems from a value issue. Like, it's some of these things that we've listed here, like attitude problems, drug abuse, lying or vaping, or, even a lack of engagement, bullying. Um, they really come from a value deficiency, right? When students don't feel valuable, they don't act valuable, right? Students behave in ways that reflect what they believe about themselves. If a student doesn't see their own worth, they're far less likely to behave in ways that reflect value for themselves and for others. How can a student truly value or respect others if they don't value themselves? When I first started doing schools, we were asked, especially after the Columbine tragedy, to go into schools and help kids have empathy for other kids, right? That's why, we came up with the shoe idea. The first thing I do when I'm at a school, I stand up with a shoe and I say, everybody in this room has a story. Your story matters. And we try to tell the backstory of, certain kids. And, you might have labeled them this way, but if you heard the backstory, it's this way. And that works to an extent, and it's powerful. It is. It's a powerful metaphor. But what we came to realize pretty quickly is that the lack of empathy doesn't come from that they don't care about other kids. It's that they don't care about themselves, right? How can a kid really care about another kid if they don't see their own worth? Robin Sharma wrote the book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. um, he said this, and I really believe this: the respect or value you give others is a dramatic reflection of the respect or value you give yourself. That's where it starts. You have to value you. Otherwise, there's no point in valuing others, right? Because belief drives behavior. What they believe about themselves. In my own personal experience growing up, I hated myself. I was told I was not valuable by actions, like directly told, but also just by the actions of others, right? My mom neglected us. There was a lot of abuse, and my dad just left. So there were messages I got that I wasn't valuable. And I was just acting that out, right? I believed this about me. So my behavior reflected my belief. Beliefs are formed from a mix of thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Those experiences reinforce how students see themselves and what they believe they're capable of. 100% me. Like I didn't think I was that valuable, like I said, and so I didn't act valuable. Psychologists say that we talk to ourselves at the rate of 1,300 words a minute. I love what C.S. Lewis said about thoughts. He said, if you realize how powerful thoughts are, you would fight to never allow another negative one. That's important because when they're walking into that school, there's all kinds of thoughts in their head about themselves that come from experiences that they have, even in some of the good homes, right? Some of the homes that you would look at and go, hey, these kids are doing good. They got good supportive parents. How do you know that they're not under some kind of scrutiny all the time to be perfect and to be the trophy of the family? And they're feeling that if I fail, if I make a mistake, I won't be valued anymore in my home because they see me as this, this representation of their family. All kinds of things are happening outside of your influence, and they walk into your class. These thoughts about themselves are walking into your classroom, right? Belief impacts behavior, and behavior impacts learning. Many students have life experiences, like I said, that deeply shape how they see themselves. These beliefs influence their behavior, and that behavior directly affects your classrooms, your school climate, and their willingness to engage in learning. We're going to break this down a little bit further in section 2, lesson 1. But the hard truth is this: changing a student's belief is necessary, but it's harder than just controlling behavior. Controlling behavior is comes down to what, you having standards in your classroom and you making those kids, adhere to those standards. And that's good. And you need to do that. But that does not address motivation, right? If you can get that student to be motivated to learn through relationship, and again, we're going to talk about all this stuff later, but if you can get them to see their value and engage in that learning, you're not going to have the behavioral issues that you would if they're just, checking a box and just doing it because, they're obligated to do it. Here's the hidden challenge. Your school's academic expectations require students to invest in themselves, to believe they're worth the effort. But students only invest in themselves at the level they believe in themselves. That is why that number is important. That's the natural tension. You are required by law to push these kids to perform, right? They have to get the grades, and you are actually, I think, unfairly judged by that. So if they're not performing, you're going to feel that on a personal level, but also on a professional level. They have to perform. So there's that natural tension, right? You want to be their friend, you want to help them in life, you want to help them get to where they need to get to, but if they don't perform, if they don't engage in your classroom, they're kind of your natural enemy, because they're going to affect your life, right? And I believe that's a very unfair situation for you to be in, but that's why helping kids see their worth is incredibly important. Let me break down 5 reasons why self-worth for a student is incredibly important for you and for them. Number 1, self-worth shapes beliefs about ability. When students believe they are worthy and capable, they're more likely to approach learning with confidence and intrinsic motivation, the desire to learn for the sake of learning. This belief in their own capability fosters a growth mindset, the understanding that abilities can be developed through effort. With a strong sense of self-worth, students are more inclined to embrace challenges rather than avoid them, seeing setbacks as opportunities to grow rather than signs of failure. Number 2, self-worth influences risk-taking and resilience. Students with low self-worth often see failure as a reflection of their inadequacy, leading them to avoid difficult tasks and challenges. In contrast, those with strong self-worth view failure as a natural part of learning and are more willing to take academic risks. This positive self-view also fosters persistence. So when students believe in their value and capability, they're more likely to persevere through difficulties, trusting that their efforts matter and they can overcome obstacles. Number 3, motivation is affected by how safe students feel. Emotional safety is essential for student engagement. When students feel valued and respected, they are more likely to be emotionally secure and cognitively present. In contrast, feelings of shame, belittlement, or being unseen shift their energy towards self-protection rather than curiosity or learning. Strong self-worth often stems from positive connections with teachers, peers, or caregivers, relationships that not only affirm a student's value, but also fuel their motivation to engage and learn. Number 4, self-worth supports autonomy and ownership. Students with strong self-worth will have internal motivation rooted in personal growth, curiosity, and meaningful goals rather than just grades or external praise. With a strong sense of self-worth, they rely less on validation from others and are more inclined to set and pursue their own personal goals, staying committed even without constant reinforcement or approval. Number 5, learning feels meaningful when you believe you matter. Students who believe they matter are more likely to see their learning as meaningful, connecting education to their identity, purpose, and future goals. This sense of value increases engagement as students are more inclined to ask questions, explore beyond requirements, and invest in their learning because it feels relevant to who they are and who they are becoming. So, in summary, when students believe they have intrinsic value, they're more motivated to learn. Self-worth fuels confidence, reduces fear of failure, increases resilience, and encourages ownership over learning. It creates a foundation where motivation thrives, not just for achievement, but for growth, curiosity, and lifelong learning. So I think these last 5 points really underscore the importance of each and every student understanding their true value, and then how that translates to an environment that is safe emotionally for other kids. I really believe that, the more students in your school see their true intrinsic value, the natural byproduct of that is going to be that it's a safe place, and that culture is automatically, without even doing the system, um, that culture automatically is going to be better, because kids are going to feel safer emotionally. They take more risks and all the things that that we talked about with those 5 points. Well, let me break down this course for you, kind of what this is all about. This course is designed in 3 progressive phases, with each phase containing 3 targeted lessons that build upon one another to create a lasting cultural impact in your school. Phase 1, you're actually in phase 1 right now. You can read a little bit more about, each individual lesson, but really what it comes down to phase 1 is I want to paint a picture for you that you kind of already know, that these kids changed, right? When they were third grade, they were sweet, innocent, nice kids. They turn 11, 12, 13 years old. All of a sudden, here comes craziness, right? And so I want to help you kind of understand that a lot of this stuff's going to be academic. You're going to already know a lot of it, but I'm going to breeze through some of it. But the cultural change and the social change is lesson three, and it really breaks down the two governments that they're under, right? And it'll make more sense later, but that's really important to understand the pressure they feel. We're hearing this a lot, right? We're hearing these kids are under a lot of pressure, the social pressures, social media, all that stuff. I'm going to break that down and help us see why they are dual kids, right? They act one way with adults and the other way with their peers. And we're just going to kind of jump into that. The second phase, we get into really trying to raise the value perception in individual students. Again, if every student in your school had the idea that they were valuable, we wouldn't even need to do this, right? This would be easy because they would see it and treat themselves with value and treat others with value. So it's important that we can do some things as educators to bring out the value. We can't create value in students. It's already there. What we can do is help them see it, right? Help them see it. We got to take the obstacles away from them so they can see their own value. We're going to get into, individual lessons on that. And then the third phase is the system. It's really taking that energy and some of the energy of the kids that have influence, right? The big buzzword today with students is, social media influences, right? Influences, cultural influencers. So there are influencers in your school, right? Influencers in your school that some of them aren't positive, right? Some of them are negative. Some of them act positive to you, but on the, student level, they're not, right? So how do we harness their power? How do we take what they are already doing and put it into a more intentional, positive um, force? And so again, it's messy, it's sticky, it gets tough doing this. This is not easy, but is something that um, with intentionality we can see, we can see a difference. So that's what phase three is about. And just to wrap this up, I want to just kind of walk through what a day looks like, right? So if we're going to be doing this in your school, this is what the day looks like. It's an all-day event. First of all, if you've already been in your school and we're implementing the system now, we are going to come back and do our second year program. So it does kind of stem around an event. So it's an all-day event where we do, you know, um, obviously the assemblies, and then we do some staff training, some student leadership training, and then a parent night. And so it's built around the day event. But what happens with assemblies a lot, as you know, is they're good, right? They're good. I think we have one of the best assemblies personally in the country. But when you come in and do them, people get hyped. They love it. They think it's great. And then it just sort of fades off. This is where the system now takes over, right? So after we do the day event, we implement the system, and it sort of goes like this. The first thing we want to do is have specialized staff training for staff that the administration will pick out. And if you want to be one of those people, I think, you could go to your administration and say, hey, I really like this. I want to be involved in this more, which will require a little work on your part. But basically, these 3 or 4 staff members will be coached by me. So part of what the school's buying is time with me. I will be on Zoom talking to them through specific problems, specific things that are happening, and so we'll do that. And it's great. I mean, I'm looking forward to that. I love talking to people about this stuff and coaching them through some of the challenges that will come their way. The second part of this will be, this general staff training, which you're in right now. Every adult that works in the building will be required to take this course just so they have an overview of what's going to be happening. After the course is over, to be really honest with you, there's not a whole lot you're going to be doing. There'll be a few things here and there that you'll hear about, but your support is really important. So it's important that you go through this course, because when you hear these things, it's really important that you get behind them and that you give your verbal support and, your emotional support to what's happening. Obviously, we want to work with the student leadership, and again, it's not going to be it will be some of those kids that are, obvious leaders, but we do actually want some of the kids that are influencing negatively. You're not going to change the culture without these kids because they're already influencing that culture. We just want to help them, be more positive about it and be more intentional about it. Um, this system's going to impact academics. It's going to impact, some of the clubs and sports teams. Not a whole lot. We want it to be kind of a passive impression with them. It's again a kind of a splash, because we don't. I want to respect your time. I want to respect, what you're already doing with these kids. But if we can take some of that language from Value Up and implement it into what you're already doing so it has a congruent message, that's a win for all of us. With parents, we want to impact their lives as well by helping them see, what's really going on with their kid and giving them some practical ways to connect with their kid. I know a lot of parents are frustrated because they can't, they don't know what's going on with their child and the child's shutting them down. And so there are some practical things that you can do to open that kid up and to be able to know what's really happening with them. So as you can see, this system is not just for kids. It's really important that the whole community of your school engages in this. And there'll be more, you know, work for others and less work for others, that kind of thing. But coming together as a, as a team is really important. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for um, going through this first lesson. And I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson. And if you have any questions for me, you could easily just reach out to me, Mike D at value-up.org, Mike D at value-up.org. Would love to hear from you, any questions or feedback that you have about this. All right. See you in the next lesson. All right. Bye-bye.